everybody and welcome to today's vlog. I'm afraid it's another sitting inside and talking at you one because it's blowing a gale outside. So I've decided to give all mine a day off today. So there's been posts going around on Facebook, people sharing photos of 10 horses that have impacted their lives or are memorable to them. So I thought I'd vlog about some horses that are memorable to me and have impacted my life with my horses. And they're not necessarily ones that have won loads, more they've taught me lessons and they've just had a job for me at the time of having them, so ones that stick out in my head. So my first pony that was memorable to me was a pony called Dennis. His show name was Dwee Calypso. We bought him when I was 5 to get me off the lead rein and going into first riddens. He was just a little schoolmaster, section A. My legs literally did not come past the saddle flaps, and he often would put his head down to eat the grass and I would go over his head. He did it in a championship once. He was champion, and then in my lap of honour he stuck his head down to eat the grass and I just went over his head. We won a lot together and we had him for about 18 months, and then he'd done the job for me and got me off the lead rein, and we got Monty, who I've shown in other vlogs. So we sold him to friends of mine, Harriet and Will Carver, who had him for many years, and he was going really strong until last year, and he eventually died last year of old age, so that was sad, but he was a really good pony for me. The next pony that sticks out is Sparkle, who was called Starfire Sparkle. She was the most gorgeous little Shetland, and she was so quality. She was owned by Alison Robes, who owns HorseQuest, who I'm now very lucky to be a brand ambassador for. And she originally just came to my mum for schooling because she'd been naughty with Alison's nieces and nephews. And we just clicked and we formed a really good bond. And nobody ever knew how good she was going to be. We were second at Horse of the Year show in the lead rein. She also qualified for international in first ridden, and she also won lots of workers and lots of show jumping. She was a brilliant little pony. And there was once Louis, my brother, was hacking her out and he wanted to go off the lead rein, so my mum literally unclipped the lead rope and she just took off, and Louis ended up jumping off her, and he's going, "Oh, you never told me how to stop." And then basically someone had to catch her at the end of the bridle path out on the road because she was very cheeky with people she didn't like. So then when we sold Dennis, we bought Monty, who I've already talked about. He was obviously brilliant, so I'm not going to go into detail more about him because I've already spoken about him. So then we got Barky, who's my cradle stakes pony. He was called Telling Our Barcud. Basically the story with him is I really wanted to jump, but I was so wimpy, and my mum was like, "Okay, we've got to buy her a cradle stakes pony," and my nan and granddad are going, "I don't know why you're buying her a cradle stakes pony, she's never going to jump." So then we bought Barky, and I was petrified, and he used to take off with me all the time because I just hung on to him. And our first lesson we had, I couldn't even get him to jump across pole because I just kept pulling him up before the jumps. So then my mum's thinking, "Oh, we've bought this pony to get her to jump and it won't jump." But then once I realised that if I didn't pull him, he didn't pull me, he was amazing, and he's the pony I owe jumping to. If I didn't have him, I would have never jumped. At the Summer Champs one year, we jumped 5 out of 5 clear rounds. He was brilliant. And eventually he dished really badly, so he eventually did both his suspensories and was never going to come sound enough to jump again. So he went to Newmarket to be a companion for racehorses, and now he's with Piggy French, being a companion to her eventers and also teaching her son to ride. So he's living the life of luxury. So then after Barky, I started jumping Monty more, and then eventually got a few more ponies that didn't really do the job, so moved on. And then we eventually got Smarty. She is called Tinned Good Friday. We bought her from Wales and she was brilliant. We originally bought her to jump open platted 13-hand workers, but I got the ride on another pony who I'll talk about in a minute. So she just did the M&M workers. Well, I had her for 2 years. She won so much. She was brilliant, and we sold her, and then she stopped jumping, so we ended up buying her back. So then we sorted her out and got her back jumping again, and then she was champion at Horse of the Year show and won Royal International in the same year in the workers. So obviously she was amazing. She also hunted, and I had great fun on her. So I had her for 4 years, and then we sold her again, and she won lots and lots. And now she's with Ruby Drummond, who won the nursery stakes on her at Royal International. And that was Ruby's first time jumping at Royal International, so that was brilliant. And I think she's now semi-retired, going to do the veterans, and I think they're going to have a foal from her in the future, so that's exciting. So the reason I didn't end up doing many platted workers on Smarty was because I was very, very lucky to get the ride on Salestan Belquest for Carol Bauer. And it was just like a right place at the right time, got the ride on him, which was so good. And I'd really only come from a cradle stakes pony onto an open platted 13-hand worker, and he'd already won a lot. And we ended up qualifying for Royal International and Horse of the Year show both years. He was in the England team, so he was the first pony I got in the England team on. So that was brilliant. Like, I watch videos of me jumping him now, and it just looks awful. Like, I couldn't see a stride, anything. I was literally just sitting there, and he was just taking me around all these huge courses. He was a really brilliant pony, but actually he's very cheeky. At the same show, I think it was Area 7, both years I rode him. The first year he bumped me off in the lap of honour. Then the second year we'd had a car crash on the way to the show, and some woman had driven us to the show, and he jumped the first jump and landed and did the biggest buck that both my stirrups came off the saddle, and I ended up landing on them. So I jumped one jump. So he didn't like that show, clearly. But he's still going now. We saw him arena eventing in the winter. And it still looks good. He's still jumping well, so that's really nice. Yeah, so he won a lot. He won the Red Division at BSPS. He was also my first ride around the Desert Orchid. And the first year I did it, so obviously I've said in other videos that there's like 21 jumps. And I was coming into the last jump thinking, wow, I've only had 2 down. This is brilliant. And then I looked around, I was like, yeah, I haven't jumped that triple. So I'd missed about 5 jumps out in the middle, including a triple. And everyone was so mad at me. But I was pleased I'd finished the course. So then next we had William, Weaver Sweet William. I had him on lease for I think 3 years off the same people we bought Barky off of in Wales. And he was quite old when we got him. I think he was about 16. And he kind of ended up more being my fun pony and just my charge around, like loving having my pony. And he actually did win a lot. He qualified for international as a worker. Also at the summer champs and the winter champs, he always won a class. I think he won the blue division, the restricted. He actually did very well, but it was very hard to get a nice show out of him because he was bonkers. He ended up being my hunting pony, and he was brilliant out hunting. Like, people would just say, oh, just follow that one, that jumper, and I jumped big as hedges on him. He was amazing. Also, I jumped the Desert Orchid on him. He was my first pony I jumped the 14-hand Desert Orchid on. I think he had 2 down maybe. He wasn't the most careful pony, but he always jumped. Like, you never questioned that you were getting from one side to the other. Then he went to a friend of my mum's for a couple of years, and then we ended up having him back just as my hunting pony. But I think it was a winter where it was really, really muddy, so I didn't actually go out that much. He's now back home with his owners. I think he's 23 now, and he's doing tetrathlon with the youngest daughter, so he's still going strong and loving life. So then I had Conan Spartacus. He was also my 14-hand worker. He was more like my proper successful 14-hand worker, whereas William was more my play around, have fun one. We bought him, he was only down the road in a yard, and like got no history on him really, like who knows, but he did brilliantly. We had quite a lot of trouble the first couple of years. He'd either be one that would jump clear and win, or you'd be stopping at the practice jump and wouldn't jump. But then I had lessons with Ben Murphy and got him sorted, and he actually had really bad ulcers. I think they were like grade 4 or something, they were really bad. And got that all sorted out. And then Ben helped me get him back jumping, get his confidence back. And then our last year, he was brilliant. We won loads. I think he's won the Champion of Champions, the Red Division. He was really good. I also started eventing him. He loved that. Hunting, he was also brilliant. He was a really lovely pony, and he's now doing schools teams and eventing. I think they're still loving him, so that's good. So then I had Johnny, Blisland High Flyer. He's very, very special to me. Basically, the whole story with him is we had a pony at the yard that I was going to do first riddens on for one of our really good owners, Joan Hayden. And my mum was saying she's getting fatter and fatter and she's being really lazy to ride and miserable. Could she be in foal? And Joan's going, no, she couldn't be in foal. Turned out she was in foal. So she went home to have her foal however long later, and then Joan gave me the foal. So by the time Johnny would have been 4, I think I was probably about 14, and we're thinking, I'm not really going to want a Section A when I'm 14. But it turned out he was beautiful, and he moved to die for, and he was just stunning. And I broke him myself, produced him myself. He was the first pony that I was trusted to do like completely myself. And he did so well. Like, he was just one of those ponies that never looked at anything, he never questioned a jump. Like, from the day I started jumping, he was just like, oh, okay, we'll just do that. And in his first season of doing workers, as a 5-year-old, he qualified for Hoys at South of England, which was his first attempt at a Hoys qualifier. I think it was one of the first open classes he'd done, actually. And then at Horse of the Year show, he was completely unfazed. Like, you'd think he'd been doing it all his life. And he jumped clear, and we were so pleased that he was 5 years old. He was just amazing. And then I didn't want to sell him, and some people approached us from America, so he ended up going to America. So that's exciting. So then there's Lisa, who I'm not going to bore you about again. Like, she's amazing. She's the best. But I won't go into detail about talking about her anymore. I've got 2 mares that I thought I should mention that I rode for other people. So the first one is Beauty on the Bay, who I rode for Sir and Peter Andrews, 14-2 show pony. That, again, like West, was just like random one ride that I rode her for like 3 years, I think. She was 4th at Horse of the Year shows, 2nd at Royal International. She did really, really well. She was great fun to ride. I really enjoyed her. And at the time, I was basically just doing workers all the time. So then to have a show pony to ride was really nice. And I think she's had a couple of foals now. There's Wilma, who I rode for Linda Buchanan Jackson, who is the only pony still to have qualified me for Olympia. She was a Shetland, but she was like the coolest Shetland you could ever find. Like, she had the biggest stride. Like, you wouldn't even think you were riding a Shetland. And her gallop was just amazing. Like, you'd come around the corner and just like slightly put your leg on it. She'd just go like stink. She was so cool. She was champion at South of England in huge championship. She was really good fun to ride. I really enjoyed her. And then finally there's Echo, Blisland Echo, who was owned by Joan Hayden. So Echo for me wasn't necessarily a successful pony for me, but it's more, he's always been around and just a pony that I just think is incredible, and I think I need to give recognition to. So we had Echo into break as a 4-year-old, and he was the laziest thing ever. We used to have to chase him around with plastic bags and it just wouldn't go. I think we kind of gave up on him for a season, and he went back to try and liven him up. Then he came back and he was still so lazy. I took him hunting and he was so slow that I couldn't even keep up with the hunt, and I had to hack back home because they'd left me. And then we tried to sharpen him up, and then he just got stupid. Like, he'd be going around really, really lazy, and they'd just spook at something and you'd end up on the floor. Like, I think I've fallen off him more times than anything else, I think. My mum always rode him in the Opens, and he qualified for Royal International Hoys every year. She qualified him for Olympia. And in his first season of doing juniors, I rode him. It was my last season in juniors. And at Royal International, we were pulled in top, like straight in top, like, you know, when the judge just goes, yeah, you, straight in. And then it was a set show, and he could never really work out set shows. Like, if you tried to change his show, he'd just get really confused. So he had to do a really, really long trot, so he thought he had to canter, and then when I told him he had to trot, he started flinging himself around. And we only went down to 4th, so that was really annoying. And I think I'm actually the only rider he's ever had that hasn't won Royal International on him. So the year after, my friend Gemma Pallett rode him, and he was champion in the juniors at Royal International. Then he went on lease to Eloise van Praag, who I think won the first ridden and the juniors at Royal International on him. He then came back, and I tried to get him jumping a bit. He really enjoyed that. And also that year we got Mia Donaldson to ride him for us in the juniors, and she also won on him. I think maybe he was reserve champion as well. And then I think Jonah eventually sold him to Kate Kerr, who won Royal International on him last year. I think overall he's won Royal International 6 times, and he's always been so unlucky at Hoys. Like, he's always gone beautifully. I think he had 2 fourths with my mum. He was second in the first ridden last year. In my opinion, there is not a pony that deserves a Hoys win more than him. Yeah, so I think he's just a very, very special pony, and one I will always remember. Thank you for watching. Hopefully now you've got a bit of an insight into some of my previous ponies that I don't actually have now. And if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and give me a thumbs up.